Hello, I am Sheridan Gold,
And I am Dianna Grayer.
and we are radio show hosts, and we heard about Jerry Dunn's Fire Symphony and what inspired him to write it.
We live in Sonoma County, California, and we know about fire season. We thought it would be incredible to have Jerry on and learn about what he has done with his pain and his grief and his loss, and we wanted to share it.
Welcome, Jerry. We're so happy to have you on.
Thank you. I'm very flattered to be asked.
So, Jerry, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, you know, this whole piece is really about the writing of the Fire Symphony I did, which was sort of a catharsis for me to get through the 2017 Tubbs fire. I've been a musician as long as I can remember. When I was 10, 11 years old, I started playing the drums. And by the time I was in high school, I was playing drums in a marching band and a symphonic band. And I had a rock and roll band and a jazz band. And so I really enjoyed playing and performing. And then I started working as a clerk in a not very successful music store that had literally, most of the time I was there, no customers whatsoever. And there's only so many times that you can polish a cabinet, right? And so all these keyboards were there, and I started to teach myself piano. And by the time I was in college, I took a music theory course. And the final for the class, there were about 200 people in the class, and the final was to write a song, which I had never done. So I wrote a song, and the professor said he would play the top five, and he played mine. And that sort of hooked me on composing. But at the same time, when he played the song, I thought to myself, oh my God, he's doing it all wrong. He's playing it too slow. He's not being right with the expressive parts. And it made me start to think, well, if I'm really interested in doing this and, sort of getting into the artistry of it, that I thought I need a way that I can put what's in my head into a recording, because I'm not a professional writer, right? I mean, I know chord structure and note writing and all of that, but I don't have the patience to write things down on, staff, so to speak. So that's where the age of synthesizers and keyboards really sort of helped me to learn what I could do. So I started writing pop songs for fun. I wasn't trying to sell them. I just did it because I liked creating, and it was a fun hobby for me. And then in 2006, my partner, Bill High, and his longtime friend and roommate, Bill Reynolds, and I decided to buy a house in Fountain Grove in the Santa Rosa area. And we moved in together with my then 11-year-old son. So the four of us were certainly a very unusual family, but we were a very happy family. We all loved the house dearly. We enjoyed it. We had multiple parties throughout the year. We loved to entertain. It was really, I have to say honestly, a pretty idyllic life until my partner was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And that sort of started a downward trend. And that was in 2013. And then, unfortunately, in 2017, the Tubbs fire happened. The house was completely destroyed. We ended up in a long-term rental in Monte Rio. And then, unfortunately, the Alzheimer's progressed. And my partner, Bill High, died in July 2018. And, my dear friend, I always thought of him as an in-law, a good in-law, not the bad in-law. Bill Reynolds died 3 weeks later. on the same day at the same time, as a matter of fact. So, I'm thinking as we're talking about this, right, we're going to be talking in more detail about the symphony, but for people who have made it this far in the broadcast, there is a happy ending to this story. I rebuilt, I met somebody new, and we're living together in the rebuilt house, and we're very happy, and I'm very happy. And I wanted to write the symphony in part because when COVID hit, right? I mean, there was no place to go, nothing to do. And I was listening to Dvorak's New World Symphony, and I thought, I think I'd like to try this. And God knows I had the time to try it, right? And I also was thinking, my friend Brian Fees wrote this graphic novel called A Fire Story. And for every victim of that Tubbs fire, the story he told was our story, right? I mean, we could all relate to it. He did in his book, he did little inserts. The book is primarily about he and his wife's experience with the fire, but he did little inserts of people he knew and their experiences. And my experience in the bills was part of that book. But I mean, people just could relate to it. And I started to think to myself, I wonder if I could do something like that musically. And interestingly enough, the writing of it, the movements and how I wanted them to interact with each other and the musical themes, it probably took me about a day to do the structure. It just poured out of me. It was amazing. And then the recording of it took about, I'd say 2 to 3 months, because it was like layer by layer. I mean, nobody helped me with it. I just did it layer by layer on this digital workstation I have. And as listeners will hear, the sounds are just phenomenal. And so I wrote it, and friends of mine who have listened to it, especially if they lost their homes, can't get through it without crying. Frankly, I couldn't get through it without crying when I was writing it, because there are some sad parts to it, but there's also the message that I want anybody, I hope anybody who listens to this will walk away with this, that it doesn't matter how hard and how dark things seem, you will not just survive, you will thrive, you will come back. This community will come back. And hopefully the symphony sort of goes through all those different parts, right? What it was like before the fire, the actual fire, the aftermath of the fire, and then rebirth. So that's sort of my introduction.
Thank you. I'm very, very excited to be playing the whole symphony here in this interview. Okay. So is there anything that you'd like to tell us before we play movement number 1, the name and what it's about?
Well, the first movement, as I mentioned, is called Before. And what I wanted to give the listener was this sense of tranquility and happiness that I was experiencing before the fire. And I'm sure most victims of the fire were, we were just going on with our lives, right? At the same time, I tried to impart in this movement a little bit of bittersweetness, because, the love of my life had Alzheimer's. I knew I was going to lose him sooner than later. And his cognitive abilities had already started to deteriorate a little bit before the fire. And I knew it was only a matter of time. before I would lose him. And so I tried to enjoy every day I could with him. Now, on a more technical level, this first movement establishes the main melodic theme that happens throughout the movements in different forms. So, that's sort of the key message, that main melodic theme in this movement is, hopefully very peaceful, very tranquil, very, I think it's a beautiful melody. And then it goes through different iterations within the context of the other movements. So that's it.
All right, everybody. Let's take a listen to the Fire Symphony movement number 1, Before.
Wow. I, I don't know, Jerry, how many times you've listened to this piece, but it's beautiful. I mean,
Thank you.
wow, incredible. Your talent too.
Oh, it's a funny thing because as a musician, especially on keyboards and things, I'm truly not that proficient. But what I do think I'm good at is I know chord structures, and I know arrangements, and I know how to put it together and program things, right? And so, this was just, and this was such a labor of love. Sounds like a funny way to describe it, but it was just, something that I felt like I really needed to do.
I'm curious. I too, like Dianna, I'm just overwhelmed with the beauty of this first movement. I'm wondering why you chose the oboe as your opening melodic instrument, and it kind of flows through all the variations. You kind of hear it, except for when the strings come in, but it's always there alone, and then doubled with flute and bassoon, and then so why the oboe?
Um, the oboe to me has always been a beautiful um, woodwind instrument but with sort of a plaintive tone to it. I guess is the best way I can think of to describe it. To me, it's always had just a little tinge of sadness mixed up with its beautiful sound. And that was at least from my experience pre-fire and after Bill's diagnosis, right? I mean, to me, it was just bittersweet, and it's why I picked the bassoon for the same reason. I thought they played well off of each other, but I've always thought both of those instruments have a little bit of a plaintive sound to them.
Mm-hmm. Just stunning. Thank you for that. Let's move on to movement 2. What can you say about its title and your interpretation of what you're writing about?
Well, so movement 2 is the actual fire, which I I defy anybody who's been through it not to hear that and just think, "Oh my God, do I have to live this again?" The night of the fire, um, I was awakened at like 2:30 in the morning by howling winds and this incessant banging on our roof of and these sounds that at the time I thought they were tree branches just hitting the roof. And I went out into our living room because the view of outside with all our blinds and stuff in the bedroom wasn't very good. And I saw the fire. I mean, it wasn't coming. The fire was here. The fire was here. The um, the sky was raining down fiery embers, just like you would experience in like a snowstorm. And I remember yelling at my two guys. By this time, my son had grown and on his own, but I yelled to my two guys, "Get up! We got to get the hell out of here!" And when we pulled the car out of the garage, I mean, we literally had no time, no warning. Um, so it was just the clothes on our back and our two dogs. And we got in the car, and as we pulled out into the driveway, I thought, "Oh my God, the car's going to explode with all this fire just raining down." I mean, it was Dante's Inferno stuff. And when we managed to make our way as we were driving down our street, two doors down from our house, was a open space that was primarily oak trees, and the oak trees were on fire. And the smoke was so bad that even though I've driven that road a million times, I drove off the road onto the sidewalk and, had to back up. And then at one point, the smoke was so thick, I thought, if there's a car coming the other way, I'm going to hit it, because I really couldn't see. And then fortunately, we made it through that. But I will always remember getting on the 101, heading south towards Rohnert Park. You couldn't go north because there were fires to the north there too, right? And looking in my rearview mirror, and the Fountain Grove community where I live, which was on the east side of the freeway, was completely engulfed in flames. And the Coffee Park community, which was on the west side of the freeway, was completely engulfed in flames. And I just thought, oh my God, it's hell. I thought the whole city was going to be destroyed. That was the perspective of it. So in this movement, I tried to encapsulate not only just the fear and the sense of fleeing, if you will, but also the fact that the fire came upon us so quick, so fast, and it was like this monolithic, unstoppable beast. And in the middle of this movement, you hear all these pops, right? And at the time, I didn't know what those were as I was fleeing from the fire, as we were fleeing from the fire. And I learned after the fact that those were propane barbecue tanks exploding, because the fire was just swallowing them up and making them blow up. And so right after that part of this movement where those pops stop, you will hear the melody from the first movement, but it's done in just this terrifying key, and some notes are inverted, because it was just like our life before the fire. Even then I knew it. Our life before the fire was never going to be the same again. That was destroyed. And the movement ends as it sort of ended for us. Even as we got to safety and evacuated, all we could hear were fire sirens everywhere. So the movement ends with a fire siren.
So what is the name of the second movement?
The Fire.
All right, everyone. The Fire.
That was so intense. I felt the urgency. I felt the urgency of it all. Wow. And it made me emotional, Jerry. I teared up. I saw the flames. I saw the chaos, you know? And I'm just curious, how are you reacting to it now, you know?
It's always easier, I think, to look back on bad things that happen in your life when you're on the other side of it. You know, it doesn't make it any less terrifying or intense or, you know, soul sucking, if you will, while you're going through it. But to realize that you can face something like that, I guess. And, you know, I say this an awful lot about everything that happened to me and other fire victims, right? With losing everything, right? But but in hindsight, you realize you didn't lose everything, you know, you're still alive, you survived the fire, and in many cases, I think in most cases, have now gone on to build their lives again. And it can be done. So, you know, there's always a little piece of me when I listen to that fire movement that I think about you know, the fact that my bill already was not at 100% mental capacity, right? And our friend Bill Reynolds was, I think, 90 at the time, and he was a very active 90. But it sort of fell on me to get everyone out of there, to get our dogs out of there, right? To get us to safety. And, you know, I'll talk a little bit more about this when we talk about the third movement. But, you know, there's a little bit of pride I have with that I was able to take care of my family and, you know, protect them and get us the hell out of Dodge, right? So, you know, I feel like I'm meandering a bit, but, you know, at the same time, and a lot of my friends who lost their homes when they heard that movement, they said, "Oh my God, you got it right." And that's what I was striving for.
One thing when I was listening to it earlier, one thing that struck me was the unpredictability of what was going to happen within the movement. And I was thinking to myself, before I heard your explanation about the theme, revisiting the theme, but in inversion and things like that, in different key, when I was listening to it earlier, I thought, wow, this is so unpredictable. And isn't that how the fire was? It was so unpredictable. And it was an analogy that I came up with, that I was wondering was that an intended outcome for you in this movement?
Yeah. The chord structures and the dissonance and all of that was absolutely intended to impart the sense of chaos, right? But underlying all of that, you hear this rhythm track, right? That never varies. It's just going bump, 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 right? Because that's what the fire was like. For a lot of us, it wasn't that it was unstoppable, right? It wasn't slowing. It just kept coming, right? And, you know, for many of us, we didn't know for 2 days if we had a home or not. And again, in hindsight, we should have realized as we were fleeing, we weren't going to have a home, right? There was just no way in hell it was going to survive. And, you know, whole neighborhoods were destroyed. So.
One more thing I wanted to say about the never ending, its pulsing rhythm where the percussion's section, the timpani, and I thought, when I first heard that, I thought, oh my God, a timpani player is going to have a ball playing this piece of music, right? Even though it's so tragic, but it's very timpani and percussion heavy, and I'm thinking, wow, they're not just going to be accompanying here. They're going to be really like a main character in this movement.
Well,
Awesome.
as you know now, right, those are my roots, right?
Right.
So I'm always going to have a lot of drums and stuff because that's just me,
That's
right?
great. That's really great. Yeah.
So, and I did play the timpani in high school for like 3 years, so I loved it.
Yeah. So let's go to the third movement, and why don't you tell us about it, and then we'll play it.
Well, this movement is called Aftermath. It's about what happened immediately after the fire, and a little bit more long term as well. So without a doubt, it's just the saddest piece of the four movements. It opens with sort of that secondary theme you hear in the fire, where it goes do, 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 do. But now it's done in almost like what I was trying to impart musically was this sense of resignation, of the horrible loss of our homes and going through the rubble, trying to see if you could salvage anything. In my case, I found one Spode Christmas cup, which I had like 12 of them. So why that one survived, I don't know. The movement's done in a very intentional, slow tempo, one foot after the other, because that's what it felt like to me, and I think that's what it felt like to a lot of fire victims. It was just, okay, I need to get clothes. Let's get clothes. Almost Maslow's hierarchy of need, right? I need to get shelter. Where am I going to stay? All right, I need to find out about insurance. There were just so many things to do, and in my circumstance, I had nobody to help me. I needed to do it for my family. And so, as we're all doing this step-by-step piece, we're trying to get things done. And at the same time, there's like this unimaginable blanket of sadness and loss. And in my case, so the very first part of the third movement is very much, I think, everybody's experience. But you will hear in the movement a piece where the cellos are featured. And then right after the cellos, there's this almost like what I call a stair stepping of melody as it starts to go up. And that was about my bills dying and going hopefully to a better place. Because I was so happy that they were out of pain. My bill never understood that the house had burnt down. When we were renting in Monterey, he used to say to me, well, this has been a nice vacation. When can we go home? And I would just, say soon. But, at the same time, I lost my family. And then at the very end of this third movement, you hear the main theme again inverted. And that was really me thinking, what the hell do I do now? And that's the third movement.
And what is the title?
It is called Aftermath.
Okay. Enjoy Aftermath, everyone. That last chord was surprising.
Well, it was meant to, take that theme and sort of end it on a bit of a down note, instead of the upending from the first movement, because, you know, that
Yeah.
Yeah.
that part of my life was gone. You
I,
know,
I,
the house is almost inconsequential, right? I mean, yeah, you don't like losing it, you don't like losing all the stuff, but if you still have your family, um, that's what makes it so wonderful, right? But I lost my family too, so I had to deal with that.
yeah, and I felt that what you described earlier was that step by step, taking one step and the next step, and
Yeah.
that not knowing, that wandering of like what do I do? Like you say, you lost your family, and now you're in your house and just everything. So
Well,
yeah.
and for a lot of us fire victims, right? I mean, we had insurance, but we'd never had to use it before. I was more fortunate, I think, than a lot of homeowners because we hadn't been in the home that long, while other people had been in their home much longer, and so their insurance coverage was still based on potentially the price
Mm,
of what they paid for the house, hence the issue of underinsurance. And even though I was underinsured, it wasn't as much. But but I didn't know any of that at the time, right? I mean, I sort of knew my insurance policy, but for all of us, we're like going, well, what do we do next? Where does this happen? And then you start to learn. I was very lucky that I just had crackerjack insurance. They never fought me on anything. You know, uh, they didn't make me jump through a bunch of silly bureaucratic hoops. But I knew other people that just had to do all sorts of nonsense. Like, their house had completely burned down and they were required to do a spreadsheet where they listed every single thing they owned, what it was worth,
mm,
um, how much it costs to replace it. For God's sakes, you're trying to build your life back. And my company finally just said, "Oh, we're just going to give you the policy limits. You don't have to do that." So anyway, it's yeah, it was a tough time.
So tell us a little bit about the fourth movement, Jerry.
Well, the fourth movement is my favorite, and probably a lot of people who listen to it would agree with that and have told me that. It's called Rebirth, and it's basically having gone through two movements of, you know, trial and tribulation, if you will, coming out of the other end and uh, coming out in a positive way. It's a friend of mine who listened to this said he thought it was the embodiment of the Sonoma Strong slogan, that no matter what happens, it's not just recovering from the ashes, it's marching forward. It's not just surviving, but really flourishing, you know,
mm,
really building your life back. And that's exactly how I felt. I was rebuilding a house I loved. I met a wonderful man who is now my life partner, and I am busy living my life. And I know that both my bills would not have it any other way. That is what they would want for me. So this movement is one of triumph. It's not just my triumph, but I think all fire victims of these horrible fires and their triumphs as they rebuild and reestablish their lives. Um, our lives can never be what they were before, but that doesn't mean that our life isn't wonderful in its own right now. And certainly mine is. And most of the people I know who lost their fires or lost their homes in the fires would say the same thing.
Beautiful. All right, we're going to play movement number 4. It's called Rebirth.
Yes. Beautiful. I felt like you were this like you were like tested and you just never gave up and you just survived and you were at the top of the mountain and you were just like, yes, you know what I mean? It felt like that rush of greatness and oh my word, survival and thriving, and it was powerful. Yeah.
Well, thank you. You know, that was what I was going for. I was thinking, I'd never thought about this before, but I was thinking about it as I was listening to that movement today. There's an old movie, I think it was done in 1938, called San Francisco, with Clark Gable and Jeanette MacDonald. And it's the story of the great earthquake and subsequent fires of San Francisco and how it destroyed everything. And at the end of that movie, there is a scene where the fire is out and they all say, "We're going to build a new San Francisco." It is they're charging up the hill. They're singing "Glory, Glory, Hallelujah." And I thought, you know, that was what I was going for. But I mean, I have to admit, I didn't consciously think this at the time I wrote it. But I thought, but that was sort of that, you know, we'll deal with this. We'll take care of it. So
Something that I really want to ditto Diana's interpretation, her feelings about that. It was just so magnificent. I could just see you riding into the sunset with, you know, everything intact, just like, yes, I did this. So much to be proud of.
yeah, the picture that was shown there of my current partner Robert, and as we were unpacking that artwork, the artwork has its own story because I love that artist, and I had several of his posters and paintings around the house before the fire that destroyed them all. And so part of my quest in the 2.5 years before we moved back into this house was to see if I could find any copies of those. And I found those three in Laguna Beach. So,
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. When we see Robert smiling so big and the music's coming on, it's hard not to smile. And as people watch the beautiful images that you have incorporated into this taping of your show, of your symphony, I'm sure that anyone watching the fourth movement and seeing these beautiful slides are going to smile as well. One thing that I heard that I'd never heard before that I heard today was your very last chord. I heard a seventh, which adds just a little bit. I mean, it's not completely resolved in your last chord. There's just a little bit of tension in there. There's just a little bit of
because there's still more to do.
Yeah.
Right? And especially at the time I wrote that, like I was back in the house, right? But it wasn't finished yet, and the landscaping wasn't done yet. The neighborhood, sadly, I mean, let's see, what is it? A little over 3.5 years, I guess, since the Tubbs fire. And, you know, sadly, where I live and in a lot of the Fountain Grove areas, it still sort of looks like a war zone because there are a lot of lots that are still empty, that still have fire damage from 3 years ago. And I think there are people who are still uncertain about whether or not they're going to rebuild or not.
So, any last words? I'm wondering, like, in your last words, your last thoughts, where do you want to go from here with your symphony? What's your vision?
I honestly didn't have much of one when I did it, other than to do it for myself. I mean, I certainly never wanted to make money on it, but I did it for myself. I did it in part for my friends who had gone through this, right? And sent them a copy of it, and they were blown away. And then a colleague of mine, we're on a homeowners association board together, were at the time, and I sent it to him, and he just went nuts over it. And he said, "You have to do something with this. You have to send it to the Santa Rosa Symphony, or you have to get it performed." And I sort of went, yeah, you know, but thank you. But then I did started to think there was some way I wanted to get this out. And then honestly, that's when you two stepped in. which because of not my Robert, the Robert that I was on the HOA board with, because of his comments and the last interview that you had done of Robert and Robert and me, whatever. I thought, well, I'll just send it to you, and because it's part of my background. And you guys just went so nuts on it that I started to think, I really want to share it. I want um, uh, other people who are fire victims. I think music is a powerful motivator. I think it's a powerful reminder of things. Um, it's obviously a long time after the Tubbs fire, but sadly we've had so many fires since then, right? And I'm sure there will be some more. So I would hope people could hear this and take heart. One of the I'm a litigant in the PG&E settlement case, and one of the law clerks was interviewing me for some stuff, and I told her about the symphony, and she said, well, I don't know that the attorneys will want it, but she said, I lost my home in the recent fire, and so would you please send it to me? So I did, and she took heart from it, and that's what I want people to do, is take heart from it. I mean, you go on sort of a horrific journey. It's like a demonic version of Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, but you come out at the end.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking about, the journey. It's, the sadness of it all and a reminder, but it's very cathartic for people. There's the end, like you say, there's rebirth, there's hope, and you giving people hope. And I think some of the people, you talked about, Jerry, about the open lots and people not making decisions. I mean, this could be potential for them to have a little bit of hope, that things can be different in their lives too. But you worked hard.
It is sort of amazing. I don't know why I continue to be so optimistic with what I've gone through, but I actually think I do, because I think we all have trials in life, and we all have barriers in our way that we have to deal with and climb. I don't believe anyone has a charmed life, right? And I think it's how you approach it. And for me, it's like just knowing that there was this light at the end of the tunnel. I believed that, even though a little voice inside of me was saying, well, really, with all the, how in the hell is this going to happen? But it did. It did. And at the time I wrote the symphony, I was at that point. I was at the rebirth point. So it was like going back in time and seeing the history of the whole journey.
And I still can't get over what you said, is you got the whole outline down in one day. All your themes down in one day. Just incredible.
Well, there are times as an artist, when, and I think it probably has to do with when it's that close to you, it just poured right out of me. I had that main theme in maybe an hour, and then and then, as I said, the lengthy part was all the arrangements and stuff, and that sort of structure. The fire, believe it or not, the fire movement was the easiest one to do, because it was just mass chaos. I mean, it was organized mass chaos, because I knew I wanted things like minor chords and things that were very ominous sounding, and sort of that stair stepping of up and down and up and down, because for one moment you think you're safe, and then the next moment you're not again. And So, but that came together very quickly.
Well, we want to thank you so much for taking your time to explain your symphony, to let us play your symphony, and we wish you the best of luck getting your symphony out and helping as many people as it can and as you can. Thank you
Well,
so much, Jerry.
You're welcome. And again, I thank you so much for doing this for me. I consider it a great honor. So,
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank
bye.
you.